Welcome back. It's still Democracy Day, and of course, we've binged through the president's speech, but it appears as if there's more to reflect on. And this time around, we're headed to the economy. Of course, we'll look at some of the high points of the president's speech where that is concerned. But we continue to ask that, are we marking Democracy Day based significantly on the handover from the military to civilian administration, or Democracy Day as one where it is a festival of all, not just a festival of the elite? And so let's look at the relationship between security and the economy. And joining us on this particular segment is economist Mr. Roman Osegale. Good morning, sir, and happy Democracy Day.
Happy Democracy Day. Thank you for having me. Indeed.
Let's begin with, some of the things that the president talked about in his Democracy Day speech, where the economy is concerned. He did say that, the reforms of the administration have produced economic stability, and revenues, have increased, and of course they have been prioritized. Let's look at what economic stability means to the administration as against what is the reality of Nigerians. And in the area of prioritizing increased national revenue, do you see that as the lived-in experience of Nigerians?
Okay, thank you very much. I think when we're talking about priorities, right, in the early 2000s, between 1999 and 2010, we had one of the most phenomenal growth in economy in this country, right? But at the same time, when you look at data from the NBS, right, extreme poverty, people who fell into poverty also increased, right? That means that we're doing something wrong. What it then means is that we are not prioritizing what we should direct these funds into. And for me, I've always said this, right, that if you want to destroy a country, just destroy the education, right? Destroy the human capital development, and everything starts to fall apart. You don't need guns, you don't need bombs, you don't need wars, right? Just destroy that sector. And I've always said is that, like, everything we're facing in this country today is as a neglect and not prioritizing the education and the health sector, and basically the human capital development sector of the economy.
Now, you also have some of your thoughts where the relationship between the economy and insecurity is.
Yes, definitely.
So take us through some of them.
Okay, so I sent in some slides, right? And over the years, what we've done is basically we've neglected the human capital development sector of the economy. We basically neglected education, right? And that has had its ripple and multiply effect into the economy. Today, Nigeria has about 20 million out-of-school children, right? 20% of that is in 20% of the out-of-school children in sub-Saharan Africa are Nigerians. 45% of all out-of-school children in West Africa are Nigerians, right? And then 60% of Nigeria's out-of-school children consist of girls. And we know the importance, right, of the female child in the continuing education. So if you have 60% of this number being female, right, you can now see and project what is going to happen in future. It is also, it has been stated that when a female child is educated, right, the probability of the offspring going through school and completing education is much higher globally. You understand? There are data and statistics to that. But when you look at the data and statistics coming out from Nigeria, I want to differ on what the president is saying, right? The insecurity we have today is just the beginning, is the iceberg of what, it's a tip of the iceberg of what is to come. So it's a tip of the iceberg of what is to come, right? Now, when you look at the slides on the screen, lack of investment in education will always lead to increasing poverty. Increasing poverty leads to increased insecurity, decreases economic growth, and also increased insecurity stagnates economic growth. So they are all interrelated, right? And when you look at the data over time, the next slide, when you look at the data over time, you see that Nigeria invests the least in education as a percentage of GNP in the sub-Saharan Africa, the whole of Africa. And when we now compare it to the next slide, you see that Nigeria still invests the least in the world. So all these things have repercussion. If we are going to prioritize investments, we must prioritize investment in human capital. The fall, the destruction, the neglect of the educational and health sector, and basically the human capital as a whole, is that it is what has led to the destruction of the Nigerian entity itself.
But when you look at the allocation, budgetary allocation, yes. 2026, for example, the top four, you find education there. So it's security. Incidentally, you mentioned security. The president also did 5.41 trillion naira yes. budgeted to security, infrastructure, then education. Yes. So at this point, if we're doing 3.5 trillion on paper, right, what do you want to see change? Is it the figure itself, or the way the figure is allocated, or the way the figure is released? Because it's one thing to have it on paper, yes. it's another thing to
let me come in here, right? There is this thing called, let me go back to my, I don't want to miss anything. Okay, so when insecurity stagnates economic growth by destroying productive assets, driving away foreign investment, and forcing government to divert funds, right? There's what you call misallocation of state resources, right? Now, deficit spending. So government strips funds away from schools, roads, and hospitals to finance military hardware and security personnel. So when you have 20 million kids outside school, and you have about 70 million people, right, living in extreme poverty, and then another 140 million living on the poverty threshold, right? Yeah, good, multidimensional. What do you think that is? That is a recipe for disaster. In fact, that is going to cause a major regional instability. We will still come to the regional instability. Do you understand? So what will now happen from there is that as insecurity increases, what basically will start happening is misallocation of state resources.
So do you want to see more funds into education?
Good. So rather than funds going into investments, right, of human capital, what will start happening is that government will start moving funds into what? Into security.
Which we're seeing already.
Yes,
so I'm asking, do you want education to be number one?
The education and health has to be number one. Let me come in again. Let's go to South Africa, right? South Africa budget for 2025-2026 was about 141.1 billion, right? 70% of that went into education. In fact, I think infrastructure got the highest, about 54 billion. Education came second with 28 billion. Health came third with about 15 billion. You understand? Between education, health, and infrastructure, got 70% of the budget. That is an investment economy. You get it?
They're not battling banditry.
Yeah, that's because that's the point I'm trying to make. They have not neglected. Go down the memory lane from 1990. South Africa has always prioritized what? Education and health. You understand? They prioritize human capital development. So down the lane, it is not giving them problems. You neglect that sector, this is the insecurity you see. As I say, and I will continue to say, whatever we are facing today is a tip of the iceberg of what is to come.
The area of security.
Yes.
And that's really scary.
Yes, it is scary. Because when you have 20 million kids outside school, you have about 70 point something million living in extreme poverty. That is a recipe for disaster.
So let's see how, because we're looking at the federal government here, let's also see how we can integrate the subnational. Because, for instance, primary and secondary education should actually be the responsibility of the state and the local government, yes. if my understanding of that is correct. And we know how Nigerian politicians, because we have to be brutally honest, what they prioritize is easily what people can see to say, I can vote for you. For instance, there's an obsession to build airports, even when they are not viable. There's an obsession to build bridges when it's not necessary, or flyovers and roads. Those are the things the class of politicians we have are more interested in, because they want to show what they can present for re-election. So if you were to advise at a sub-national level in terms of education, besides the money being earmarked for education sector scaling up or increased, how should it be allocated to see effectiveness in the educational sector across the sub-national level? Because you see all these big numbers, they hire sometimes to build classroom blocks. Governors are building classroom blocks. Essays are building classroom blocks. Commissioners are building classroom blocks. So what exactly is needed to transform?
I think to answer that question, I'll put it this way. Nigeria is a mineral resource-rich country, but a fiscal poor country. Now, I was talking about the South African budget, right, compared to that of Nigeria. While there were about 63 million people in South Africa, education budget was about 28 billion. Health budget was about 15 billion, right? Compared to Nigeria's education budget that is $2.51 billion and $1.77 billion for health, over 200 million people, right? Now, when you're faced with this kind of scenario, what you need to do is majority of your funds should be going towards investments. And the major investment in any economy is the human capital. So at the subnational level too, government needs to prioritize both state and the local government. And I think that a time has come where government needs to pass a law that a certain amount, you can't go below a certain amount for investment, or a certain percentage of your budget for investment in these sectors. So if a state is going to bring out their budget or present their budget, right, they already know that even if they are presenting maybe $1 billion, right, that a certain percentage, maybe 20%, we cannot afford to go less than 15%. If we start from there, then we now need to sit down, okay, how do we allocate the funds? Because if you look at it now, right, teachers need to be trained. Their salaries need to be increased. You understand? Classroom blocks, when you go to some secondary schools in the hinterlands, right, or even in the cities, you will be amazed. And I also feel, right, to answer your question, I also feel like we don't need to start building new. We need to start focusing on the existing and maintaining them. You understand? Because you see, just like you said, that every politician wants to do something everybody will see, right? If you go across board, you go across the schools, the amount of classrooms, amount of infrastructures in the schools that need to be renovated and upgraded are so much compared to saying we want to start building new ones.
And that's the reality. Every day we see videos of, schools where pupils are seated on the floor or under a tree, learning in very poor conditions, or we see blown open roofs. Those are the issues. And another part of the conversation is, yearly when budget releases the State of State report on finances, we see, huge revelations of allocations to certain aspects of, states' national life that are not necessarily the areas where they should be prioritized. There are reports that allocations to the office of the governor in some states is more than, education allocation. How do Nigerians begin then to follow the money and demand accountability amid conversations that some state budgets are the most opaque in the country, or even in these parts?
If you can do it in a minute, because of time.
Yeah,
okay, so I read the budget page by page every year, right? And what I look out for is where funds go into, whether they're investments or they are basically recurrent expenditures, right? Now, but the major thing I want Nigerians to do is that if there liberty, freedom, right, good governance is never given on the platter, is never given freely on the platter of gold. We have to demand for it. And the first step in this allocation thing is that we need to start confronting the government. So when the budget comes out every year, Nigerians need to rally around together, maybe form a body, and then reject the budget. You understand? Even if we have to go on mass protest, we need to let the government know that this is not acceptable to the society anymore. Mm-hmm. And once we start doing that, we shut down the economy. Let them redirect funds into investments rather than expenditures that will not give us any priority in future.
Yeah. Mr. Segale, your report is quite telling. 73.1 million people living in extreme poverty, 31% as of June 2026. It's a document that should be made public so that everyone reflects on it. Mr. Roman Osegale is an economist. Thank you for coming on the Morning Brief, and happy Democracy Day once again.
Happy Democracy Day to you too. Thank you.